Hello, you are watching a Channel 4 News live stream. Yes, a live stream as Donald Trump is about to become US president for the second time. You are currently watching live footage of the White House doors, the White House porch. President Trump, who is about to be inaugurated, is in there at the moment, having just had tea with President Biden, the outgoing 46th President of the United States. I'm Keme Nzerem, and we are going to bring you uninterrupted coverage of an historic day in America's capital. Historic not just for the USA itself, but because of that country's huge, huge significance for much of the world. I am delighted to say I'm joined by my colleague and great friend, Jonathan Rugman, here with me in the studio. Jonathan and I worked together many, many years ago in about 1800 in the US Bureau. And in fact, Jonathan taught me pretty much everything I know. So it's a pleasure and a delight to be joined by you. An exciting day.
Yeah, very exciting day. I think the most consequential 24 hours possibly for any US president, given the huge raft of things this man wants to get done. If you think about it, he signed one executive order on his first day as president in 2017. And an executive order is a kind of a declaration of presidential rule by decree, if you like.
I mean, he's allowed to do it. I mean, there's nothing unusual about that, right?
No, but he signed one of them in 2017, and his staff are briefing that there's going to be about 200 of them. So this is a man in a real hurry. This is a man who isn't sort of governing as if for 4 years. He's governing as if he's only got a year or two. And of course, he's got the midterm elections only in a couple of years from now. American politics is ruthlessly relentless.
Well, they're permanently campaigning for the next election,
They're permanently campaigning. But this time, he's 78. This is his second last shot at the job. And I think he is determined to change America in ways which no president really has perhaps in many, many years been as committed as he seems to be in this.
And they're calling it shock and awe, aren't they?
They are calling it shock and awe. I mean, Trump has said he thought about taking it easy, taking it slowly, rolling out these executive orders over a period of time, but he decided no. He loves attention. He loves making a splash. He's going to be doing it from today, from day one. And he actually said, "I will not be a dictator except for day one."
Except for day one.
And so here we are on day one.
Which I think we have to assume he said in jest, right?
Well, it's that whole thing about whether you take him seriously or literally.
Right.
I think he wants to make a splash. He is going to announce the bare bones of the largest deportation program in American history. And I think that will be the central plank of day one, which is immigration, which was obviously central to his campaign.
Yeah, I mean, they've been signaling that for quite some time. But look, just before we get into the kind of detail of what he might or might not do, what he has said as opposed to what he actually will do, there is a timetabling issue for wanting to get this stuff out, because in some senses, he's only got one term, which makes him immediately, and I hate to use the phrase as such because it's usually when a president comes to the end of his term, but he starts this term with all this huge power, but already as a lame duck. But he doesn't have to worry about campaigning again.
He doesn't have to worry about campaigning again. Does he care about legacy? Maybe only if a member of his own family in a sort of dynastic, Bush-like way wants to go into politics. I think...
And one thinks about his youngest son, what that means.
Yes, but I think what we're witnessing, I mean, what Joe Biden described in a speech last week as the rise of an oligarchy. And I think one of the most intriguing things we've seen so far today is seeing Tim Cook of Apple, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook,
all at the
the head of Google, the head of TikTok, previously just banned by the Supreme Court, but suddenly given a reprieve by a man who isn't yet president. So we're seeing very, very publicly an alliance between the kind of the big business tycoons of America and this man that many of them initially had grave doubts about. And just as you wonder about the bromance with Elon Musk, you wonder how long this alliance with these business titans who've helped to fund this inauguration, amongst other things, how long will that last? How long will, Trump demanding that they reduce production in China and bring jobs home back to America? Huge multinational corporations now having difficult choices to make about how to stay on side with this president and continue making gazillions of money at the same time.
I mean, there are going to be very real-world consequences to the American economy if some of the measures he has promised he will take, measures that were so popular on the stump, but deportations, tariffs. I mean, this isn't just stuff you can just do without it having an impact on inflation, labor availability, the very things that Middle America really cares about.
Yes, and it's interesting that the Wall Street Journal today has revealed that he's not going to be providing any detail on the tariffs today.
Because how do you read that?
Well, I read it that Trump cares about the Dow Jones Industrial Index. He cares about coming into leaving the presidency with the Dow Jones Index higher than when he left it. He's a New York businessman to his fingertips. And so the thing that he is proposing that could most threaten that is this introduction of tariffs, because what tariffs do is they reduce global trade, they increase inflation. Americans have to pay more for goods. Yeah. And if Americans feel at the end of a Trump presidency that they're worse off than they were at the beginning, then as far as Trump's concerned, what was the point? He wants everybody, as many people as possible, to feel better off. So I think, although we've heard about tariffs of up to 60% on China, 10 to 20% on Canada and Mexico, I think this is going to be a very transactional presidency in which he threatens to do these things. He doesn't necessarily do them if the countries that he's targeting give him something in return.
And the talk of tariffs, we're seeing live pictures right now from inside the Capital One Arena, which is the sports stadium where where the inauguration proceedings are going to be live streams on these huge, great jumbotron screens. But talk of tariffs and immigration, that's precisely what the people that voted for him, the people that we are seeing now, some of them, of course, wearing black MAGA caps, which is kind of MAGA on steroids. This is the kind of talk that drew them to him. Yep, he likes it. He's obviously seen something that he's interested in. And perhaps that's a sign that the president is going to emerge from the White House very soon and begin to make his way to the Senate for the formal proceedings. I mean, the pomp, the ceremony, we have Black Rod, they have Inauguration Day.
Yeah, and remember, a lot of these people sitting in, and that's a basketball arena in downtown Washington, D.C. that you can see there. It's only got a capacity of 20,000 people. And these people have come from all over America to be there. A city which traditionally votes Democrat and probably is a lot of people staying at home watching it on TV. Trump won't be able to brag as he did last time in 2017 about record crowds on the Mall as he at his inauguration first time round. But what he will be interested in, you can be sure, is knowing what the television audience for this is. Because he'll want everybody to be watching, and he will no doubt say in his inauguration speech that he is governing for all Americans. It's what he said the night that he won the election. But the fact of the matter is that about half of America simply won't believe him.
Does he have to? I mean, so he won the popular vote, but actually not by as much as people assume he did. The congressional majority is not big. Does he not have to be slightly careful?
I don't think so. I don't think that's the way he thinks. I think, as I said earlier about tariffs, there are some things he will threaten and not necessarily do. I do think this man has an innate core belief in laissez-faire capitalism, but also in not shocking the system to such an extent that that it can't cope with it. So I would be cautious about the implementation of tariffs. There will be easier wins, I think. I mean, it is Martin Luther King Day.
It is.
Ironically, there's going to be culture war stuff about gender rights, about removing diversity and inclusion programs from federal government spending, about, if not driving transgender people out of the military, then certainly not making a song and dance about it. Pete Hegseth, his choice for Defence Secretary, is waging a war on woke, it seems, more than he is waging any kind of war anywhere else through the Department of Defence. So I think we're going to see quick movement on that. We're going to see quick movement on the environment in the sense that pulling out of the Paris Agreement on climate change and
we're
recommencing.
just seeing, I think we're just seeing Jill Biden and Melania exiting the White House on their way. That's one of the beasts being the armor-plated cars that weigh about 15 tons that transport senior White House the officials, the president, the wives, and other senior officials. So that would suggest that we are going to see the former president, well, Biden is still president technically, but the outgoing president and the incumbent about to make that historic journey.
Yeah, it's a bomb-proof Cadillac, and there has been some speculation that Trump was tempted to do some of the travelling today in a white dumper truck because he used one on the campaign trail, if you remember, after Joe Biden was heard describing his supporters as garbage. Very much in the vein of Hillary Clinton having talked about the basket of deplorables.
Yeah.
And I think there is a sense with Trump and the people around him that the deplorables have come to Washington.
Yeah.
The garbage people have come. We're unashamed of it. We are who we are. We've come to drain the swamp, traditional analogy of Washington as a sort of cesspit of political intrigue. And so, a tempting vision for Donald Trump to make an appearance, not in the Cadillac, but also on a dumper truck.
I love the mixing of metaphors. Cesspits. Cesspits and dumper trucks.
Very long tradition in America perceiving Washington as the seat of all ills. And I think a lot of those people gathering in Washington for this inauguration do see it that way. People from out of town coming in, believing this is a man who's going to deliberately overturn things and make life difficult for the bureaucracy and the status quo.
But that's why people love him.
That's exactly why they love
he's the disruptor in chief, is he not?
He is the disruptor in chief, and maybe we should say something about this Department of Government
efficiency. Yeah,
the Doge, which is something that Elon Musk is supposed to be running, which is supposed to trim down the size of the US government. At first, Elon Musk talked about a $2 trillion saving from a $6 trillion budget.
And that's the vice president leaving and the incoming vice president.
No love lost, of course, between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. It's worth saying that Michelle Obama is staying away from the ceremony today, although her husband Barack will be there. Nancy Pelosi, the former House Speaker, is also staying away. So the women are, it seems, voting with their feet, while the men do what they always do. The US president's turning up those who are still with us to salute the new commander-in-chief. And until now, the American flags were at half-mast. You can see a flag there because of the death of Jimmy Carter at the age of 100. And Trump pointed out that it was a rather doom-laden look for America to have the flag at half-mast when he's being inaugurated as president. And so the flag has been raised again and will be lowered again after the inauguration is finished.
I should imagine that is the vehicle that will be transporting the president. And it's fascinating, you were talking about the alliance of Trump fans, MAGA Central, who've come to DC and found it, no doubt, a very, very tempered city, a changed city. But this coalition that has come together, we shall see for how long, under the wider banner of Trumpism. The Uber barons, the tech gazillionaires, alongside those ordinary Americans who, for whatever reason, feel that they have been left behind, whether they have or they have not. They have coalesced under this idea that, you know what, the system ain't for us. And Washington is the very symbol of that.
Yes, and I think in a way Trump has tapped into something really elementary in America, which is this sense that anybody should be able to make it, but it's a cruel world out there. And when he does things like speak out about the war on woke and transgender issues, inclusivity, diversity issues, he's not saying that he doesn't want everybody to succeed. He's saying that he wants, in some way a kind of level playing field in a very American sense, which is man is born equal, but after that you're on your own. And so he's tapping into a profound belief that Americans have, that even though, as you say, they may feel the system is stacked against them, that he is sort of enabling everybody without favouring one group over another. And what they're all looking for is tax cuts. And I think that is not something that we'll probably see in the executive orders today, but it will go through Congress, which is trying to make Americans feel richer. Because the irony is that the US economy did well under Joe Biden. Inflation's been coming down, but Americans didn't feel it. They didn't feel it. And that's one of the main reasons why Kamala Harris lost. And as I said earlier, Trump wants to make people feel that they've got richer.
So back in the rotunda in the Senate, as you can see, it is filling up, and one assumes a red tie in an American context means the opposite of what it might mean in a British context in terms of political allegiance.
Quite a few fist salutes I saw there, which is the sort of new Trump greeting, isn't it?
And I mean, this analysis of Trump wishing to be seen by all as an enabler. In a sense, one of the questions I have for you, Jonathan, many people genuinely feel scared. They feel deeply worried about what his second presidency is going to deliver. And as the doors open, here come the presidents as they make their way out of the White House.
Donald Trump, 78, Joe Biden, 82. So by the time Donald Trump finishes being president, he'll be approaching, I think, the age of Joe Biden, and no doubt hoping that he's not in the same physical state by the end of his presidency. This is a man who seems to survive on hamburgers and Diet Coke.
Let's just watch them get into the car. We'll watch these pictures for a moment.
So what are they going to talk about, given that we know that Donald Trump is planning to reverse as many policies of Joe Biden as he possibly can in the first 24 hours of his presidency? What does that do to Joe Biden's legacy? Does it make him a kind of interregnum president between one Trump presidency and the next? And that will be the fear for people who support Joe Biden, I think, is that he won't be seen as having been consequential. He'll be seen as some sort of blip in history between two, terms of a Trump presidency.
Do you think he will mainly be judged for Afghanistan, nothing else?
I think history will be kinder to him as it has been to Jimmy Carter. So I think his stewardship of the US economy after the COVID pandemic will stand him in good stead. You mentioned Afghanistan. Of course, Trump likes to be seen as the decider, the guy who cuts deals. But if you think about it, it was the deal that Donald Trump struck with the Taliban
that Biden had to deliver on.
That eventually led to the Taliban advancing at speed on Kabul, and the US pulling out their troops in a chaotic withdrawal, and the advances that have been made for Afghan women in the last couple of decades set back seriously. So we talk about this deal-making president. But the track record isn't great. I mean, the other thing I would point you towards is the meeting that he had with Kim Jong-un on the border between North and South Korea.
When he was still Rocket Man.
Yeah, when there was this historic handshake. And what happened? You know, what happened to North Korea? Did it get better? Did it stop building a nuclear weapon? No.
And you can hear the cheers as the motorcade leaves Lafayette Square and drives the mile or so towards the Senate.
So the point I'm making is that yes, Donald Trump loves to cut deals, but the follow-through, the actual delivery of concrete results is something else. That said, I don't think that the release of Israeli hostages yesterday would have happened without Donald Trump basically pointing a diplomatic, rifle at the Israeli Prime Minister's head and saying, you need to cut a deal. You need to have a ceasefire with Hamas.
We'll pick the thoughts up in a minute. Let's just, I'm not sure if enjoy is the right word, but watch the ride.
So there are 8,000 National Guard troops on duty today. And given the assassination attempt against Donald Trump on the campaign trail last year, the job of the Secret Service and of the National Guard, everybody is on a heightened state of alert, as they would be anyway, but I think, assassination attempts on American presidents are pretty rare. And it is something that
So the motorcade passing some construction workers, obviously huge security detail, when not just one but two presidents are moving as they are together as one. That is probably a 60-vehicle motorcade, outriders, and a massively careful lockdown. But Jonathan, I'm surprised that there aren't more people out on the streets.
Well, it's colder than it looks, I think. I mean, because you've got, it's a minus temperature, but you've also got the wind chill factor, which makes this the coldest inauguration in 40 years, the coldest since January 1985 when Ronald Reagan was sworn in for his second term.
And also chose to go indoors.
And chose to go indoors. I mean, this is obviously very good news for Joe Biden that he is indoors. If I was Joe Biden, I wouldn't want to be sitting out in the cold. But I think it also begs the question as to whether Trump might try and organise some kind of victory parade in the summer in Washington. He's always sort of admired what happens in Red Square outside the Kremlin when the Russians marshal their forces. And you know, there is that sort of autocrat style that he has, the vibe that he has. But of course, if he does do that, people will be counting how many people turn up. Whereas the beauty of having a particularly cold day in Washington is nobody's counting the numbers.
How convenient one may observe that there can't be outside inauguration today because it is so cold, so we don't have to bother counting the numbers.
Yeah, but I think he will be counting the television numbers.
Yeah.
I want to know.
One thing that we will be lacking, sadly, is Bernie Sanders' mittens.
Yes, Bernie Sanders will be safely tucked inside. So we have the
So as you've seen, the motorcade has gone through multiple security cordons, multiple barriers, multiple checkpoints. Of course, they get waved straight through because that is what you would call a very high value car, Jonathan.
2 presidents, yes, the 45th, the 46th and the 47th. Trump being the 45th and the 47th. And it's only the second time that a US president has served 2 non-consecutive terms. The last one was Grover Cleveland in the 19th century, which makes the comeback of Donald Trump all the more remarkable.
The rather wonderfully named Grover Cleveland.
Yes, it sounds like he should be heading some Motown band.
So, the presidents will emerge from that car in a moment and begin to make their way into the Senate, into the rotunda, where the formalities will continue. After taking the oath of office, which will be administered by the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, President Trump will deliver his inaugural address. We are all ears. Will it be similar to his first inaugural address? And we can see President Biden there just walking behind the wall as he makes his way, photographers waiting into the rotunda first.
And extraordinary to think that 4 years ago, this place was the scene of an insurrection.
It is.
Inspired by Donald Trump, although he would deny that.
Well, and of course the remarkable thing is so many senior Republicans, to some extent, even accepted that he had played a role, however small, in roiling up that crowd, but they refused to indict him, of course, indicted for the second time. They're both presidents in the shot there. President Trump just walking with all of those security through to take control of the many things, the nuclear codes, commander-in-chief.
Think about this, Keme. You've got the guy on the left here, Joe Biden, has just issued what he's calling a preemptive pardon for those who are worried that they will face retribution from Donald Trump for their role in giving evidence against him about the Capitol riots.
Let's listen in. We may get a glimpse of...
How are you this morning?
Good
Mr.
morning. Thank you.
President Trump, how do you feel? President Biden?
Well,
Good morning, Mr. Vice President. How do you feel?
Vice President-elect
Comments,
and
sir?
his wife, born of Indian immigrants to the USA.
J.D. Vance, a man to watch, I think, in terms of a future presidential bid.
For sure. And it's often an assumption, isn't it, that a vice president will be anointed by his party, his or her party, in the primary or caucus that inevitably follows to take the mantle of running for president.
It's often assumed, but it doesn't happen that often that they succeed. But I think J.D. Vance has a compelling rags to riches story, which is going to appeal to a lot of Americans. Of course, he's a former critic of Donald Trump,
In very florid terms.
which is interesting in the sense that it goes to show you can criticize Donald Trump and you can be brought back into the fold if you are sufficiently contrite.
But he is also eminently transactional. So if he sees value and virtue in doing a deal, then he will do that. And I'm kind of thinking of David Lammy here, who was obviously in hot water recently for saying rude things.
Cabinet-level designees.
Right. Introductions from the compere for some of the senior delegation. So, a note on order and what we're going to see. Shortly, Joe Biden will be leaving aboard Marine Force One. His presidency ending with lots of questions, of course, about his legacy.
It's RFK
in
there,
America.
Robert Kennedy.
That's right.
So these are the people who are going to be running the country. Kirsten Nzerem, the former governor from the Dakotas, who once explained that she had to shoot her dog, amongst other things.
Because it was undisciplinable.
She's now in charge of Homeland Security. And what is striking about these cabinet picks is the lack of experience of running large organizations.
But isn't that why Trump finds them attractive? Because they are the kind of people that will walk into an organization and say, why do we do it like that? It doesn't need to be like that.
Yes, and I think he repays loyalty, and those who have stuck by him and those who have stopped criticizing him and joined him. Marco Rubio, the former senator from Florida, now his Secretary of State.
A few moments ago, we were seeing pictures of Kash Patel, who another left field pick for a senior administration official, head of the FBI, and
Marco Rubio on the left there.
and RFK indeed.
Yeah. RFK, the man who wants to remove fluoride from water, and a great anti-vaxxer as well. A hugely controversial pick.
And one of the fascinating things about this collection of Trump thinkers is that on the one hand, they house a lot of anti-vaxxers, but many of these people are also very critical of big pharma. And when we look at the American healthcare industry and overprescription and the lobbying that gets done, some of these concerns are actually held across the political spectrum. So it is a fascinating mixture of disruptors, radicals, outside thinkers.
Talking of disruptors, there's Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, chatting away. Probably the most honoured is the wrong word, but most conspicuous foreign guest because of his radical sort of slash and burn economics in Argentina, managing to bring in a budget surplus. Very much a kind of figure that Donald Trump admires.
Ideological bedfellows.
Exactly. And all about cutting government spending.
So, by this evening, Washington is going to be Trump's town. Quick rundown of the timings of the inauguration events. 11:13 DC time, that's 16:13, 4:13 London time, which is 20 minutes time. We should see the president arrive in the rotunda. Shortly after that, the new Vice President, J.D. Vance, is due to be sworn in just before midday DC time. That's 4:45 London time, about 50 minutes from now. President Trump will be sworn in. Aha, we know who this guy is, don't we, Jonathan?
Mike Pence.
Who did not do his former boss's bidding.
That's right, the former vice president. But still awkwardly shaking Trump's hand, I think, at the funeral of Jimmy Carter.
I wonder if they're going to send each other Christmas cards. Then, after President Trump is sworn in, his all-important first remarks, and we will be scrutinizing those remarks. Will they reflect some of the ingenue anger that permeated his first inaugural speech? Elon Musk in shot there, not far from RFK. Jeff Bezos.
Yes.
Indeed.
The Amazon boss who was seen in church with Donald Trump this morning. So these tech titans have now got a direct line to Trump by making personal donations to fund this inauguration, which has raised over $170 million. But one wonders, when Donald Trump talks about tariffs on China, what is Amazon going to do? What is Jeff Bezos going to do? How long can Trump keep everybody happy?
Well, you have got, to call them huge egos together, and penny for your thoughts on this. Last night, J.D. Vance didn't make the pre-inaugural speech, but who was on stage with President Trump? Elon Musk. How is that relationship going to be managed? Because they both want to be the boss.
Yeah, it reminds me of Rasputin in the court of the Russian Tsar. An unelected official with enormous power. It's not the first time it's happened by a long shot, but I couldn't help noticing that Donald Trump said with some glee that Elon Musk had not been born in the United States, which means
he
can't be president. And Trump almost tells himself that as a way of reminding himself that he doesn't need to be threatened by this very clever man who has raised a huge amount of money for the Trump campaign and has become its principal mouthpiece through his ownership of Twitter or X.
You mentioned Kristi Noem already. That is her pick for Homeland Security. To the right of her,
I think that's Lauren Sanchez. I think that's Jeff Bezos' fiancée in the centre of the picture.
We also have the boss of Google standing between Bezos and Musk. It's an extraordinary mixture of people that have come together to represent Trumpism 2.0.
Yes, and one can't say that they've done nothing in a previous life. I mean, they've all done something. I mean, some of them have done a great deal. And I can't remember a time where you saw so many titans of industry standing alongside a president, you know, as opposed to politicians, senators, and so on. And what they've done is they've kissed the ring to the extent that Jeff Bezos.
And is that Joe Rogan?
Oh, here we go.
Present arms!
Hillary Clinton there, accused by Kash Patel, the new head of the FBI, as being part of the deep state. A real figure of hatred for the Trump campaign ever since his campaign against her in 2016.
And you know, talk to MAGA people, and they will push back against this idea that Donald Trump will seek a vendetta against his political opponents and cite evidence of that as his refusal. Oh, there's W.
And Laura Bush, up from Texas.
They will cite the fact that Trump didn't go after Hillary as evidence that he lets bygones be bygones. What do you make of that?
I'm not sure I entirely believe that. I think the thirst for retribution is great. And I think that Joe Biden would not have issued these preemptive pardons on those who gave evidence against Donald Trump
Number 44.
if Biden wasn't really worried.
Conspicuously walking.
Without Michelle.
What do you make of her refute? Well,
Well,
her non-appearance. I don't want to say
the
refusal.
Obamas just put out a statement saying that Michelle Obama would not be attending, but she also didn't
Committee
attend
co-chair,
Jimmy Carter's funeral.
Mr. Steve Witkoff.
And one can't help wondering whether she just can't stand being in the same room as Donald Trump.
We are being serenaded in by a musical prelude, one of many, because we are going to hear, as time comes on, that was Tim Cook, a number of choirs. The President's own US Marine Band is going to serenade us shortly. And events will kick off proper with Senator Amy Klobuchar, who is the chair of the Inauguration Committee alongside Senator Chuck Schumer.
Yes, Amy Klobuchar has organised this whole thing. She's actually a Democrat from Minnesota.
So some of the big themes that we are going to want to get into if we have time. The executive orders that have been signaled will be signed today. Rubio in that shot.
Yeah.
Pick for Secretary of State.
Secretary of State, another one who's come into line, who's going to have to handle the difficult double brief of Ukraine and the Middle East. President Trump looking for a deal in both places to end both wars.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Because no
at
one's
this
quite
time,
sure whether
please take your seats.
the deal as it is, the ceasefire deal that now is existing, how long that's going to last.
And the compere has just told people to take their seats, so I anticipate that we will begin formal proceedings very soon. Speaking of Ukraine, a fascinating statement, or welcome, should I say, from President Putin earlier. He said, I'm just pulling up the quote here, President Putin told Russia's Security Council, "We welcome Trump's desire to restore direct contact with Russia, and this is the thing, prevent World War III. We want long-lasting peace in Ukraine."
Yeah, I mean, it's making nice noises, but it doesn't make it any easier for a deal
Ladies
to be
and
struck
gentlemen,
with
at
Vladimir
this time,
Putin,
please
who
be
fundamentally
seated.
doesn't recognize Ukraine's right to exist.
And of course, all of this coming hot on the heels of the very, very significant developments overnight in Israel and Gaza, which of course both President Biden and President Trump are laying claim to
Yeah, I mean,
having brokered.
it reminds me of the Carter-Reagan handoff in the sense that, you know, Reagan took the credit for the release of the hostages from Iran when he first became president. And of course, you've now got both Trump and Biden laying claim to having achieved this ceasefire deal. I think Trump would have loved for one of those released hostages to be there today, to be at this inauguration. That would have been an enormous feather in his cap. But as things have turned out, the first few hostages that have been released are not coming to America anytime soon.
And I know this is deep into your other brief, but on that deal, they still haven't nailed down what happens in 2 weeks. So as happy as everyone is now, okay.
There's Chief Justice John Roberts,
He is going to be officiating. There's Clarence Thomas, of course, and
Brett
the rest
Kavanaugh.
of the Supreme Court.
So this is a court that has swung very much to the right, largely because of the appointments that Donald Trump made in his first term. John Roberts at the front there was appointed by President Bush and hasn't turned out to be as right-wing as some of the subsequent appointments that have been made. And of course we had that very controversial overturning of the Roe versus Wade decision on abortion by the Supreme Court.
And the other thing the Supreme Court did, of course, was upheld the congressional ban on TikTok, which, guess what? Donald Trump wants TikTok back.
Yes, I mean, Donald Trump has said that he signed an executive order that gives TikTok the right to stay. And it's interesting that the chief executive of TikTok from China is attending the inauguration. So an organization that the Supreme Court said could be closed down on grounds of national security in America has been given a reprieve by a new US president who at first agreed with the closing of it, and then when he saw how very useful it was to his own re-election campaign, he's granted it a stay of execution. Transactional or what?
And I mean, that TikTok discussion was always couched in terms of national security, but there is another reading, of course. America really wants to protect its own tech companies, and ByteDance are pretty good. So if they can find a way to make it American?
Yes, but one of the things that intrigues me about Donald Trump is that when you talk about globalization, it's normally perceived as the sort of political territory of the left, that it's a bad thing. And what actually Donald Trump has done is he's made it an issue for the right. He's now made economic nationalism central to his forthcoming presidency with his talk of tariffs and so on, which is going to make life difficult for some of the people in the rotunda here, some of these businessmen who have outsourced a great deal of their manufacturing to China. And are we really supposed to believe that by imposing tariffs on China, those jobs will come back to America? That's the plan. If it works, I think it will be copied around the world. But a big question of whether it will and whether it won't drive up costs for Americans, which they will not be thankful for.
And curiously, tariffs is something he has said. Oh, there's Mr. Zuckerberg as well.
That's right.
Tariffs is something the president has said he is not going to deal with straight away.
No, because as we've said, he's a transactional president, so he's going to lay out the bare bones of his intention.
Oh,
Look,
the Trump
family.
children.
The children. There's Barron, who's now 18 at the back there. You may remember his mother spent a lot of time in New York during the first Trump presidency because he was still in school there. Now Melania is planning to spend, as we understand it, more time in Washington alongside her husband.
And Trump's other daughter, who we don't tend to hear much about because she has not really chosen the same kind of high-profile political path as the other siblings.
That's right. And notably absent there, Jared Kushner, who was is Trump's son-in-law and was, of course, his major advisor on the Middle East in the first Trump presidency, orchestrated the so-called Abraham Accords, in which various Gulf states recognized Israel. The absence of Jared Kushner, it's going to be interesting because I think he was very successful at talking his way across the Middle East by being the sort of dynastic son-in-law of Donald Trump. And he's back in Florida, not serving in the second Trump term, more interested, it seems, in making money through running an investment fund.
So far, in terms of international dignitaries, we've seen Javier Milei. We were told Giorgia Meloni was going to be here. Have you seen her yet?
Haven't seen her. I mean, if there's one European leader he admires, it's her, alongside Viktor Orban of Hungary. So, you know, we're talking about a new political reality in which what used to be called the far right is now being called something else, the populist right, or maybe even it's become more centrally right. I mean, I just think politics have shifted so far to the right that the norms have changed.
Well, we gather Meloni is there. As soon as we see her in the crowd, of course, we'll point her out.
Yes, a strange situation that the countries of southern Europe, including Italy, are performing better economically than the usual giants of France and Germany.
And this is the US Marine Band playing. And we understand that they will play as the president arrives into the rotunda.
There's President Milei of Argentina standing at the back, just to the right of the statue there. Having a good laugh.
What are your predictions for his inaugural speech?
I think he will say that he is the president for all Americans, and I don't think people will believe him. I think he knows, he was very clear what he wanted to do, and he will make clear that he's about to do it. Jared Kushner, there he is.
You were just speaking of him. He's made his way from Florida.
He's made his way from Florida. His father has been appointed the US ambassador to Paris. In spite of a previous conviction, the Kushner family is very close to the Trumps.
And one wonders how much the Trump family, some of those more right-wing politicians that you see there, actually have in common with the tech bros, and to what extent the tech bros just blow with the wind and are attracted to power and influence. And you know, one thinks particularly about Zuckerberg and his banning and unbanning of Trump over the years.
Yeah, I mean, you think about if you're an employee of Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos there. I mean, you know, they govern these huge corporations, and not all of them will have voted for Donald Trump. But as you say, they've signed up. There they are in a very, very public way.
I think that
Ladies and gentlemen,
drum roll means
former vice presidents, the Honorable Dan Quayle, accompanied by Mrs. Marilyn Quayle, and the Honorable Michael Pence.
So the also-rans. Mike Pence, who I can't imagine having to hold his tongue as often as he must have had to do while he watched the frenetic, chaotic Trump first presidency. It'll be interesting to see how organized it will be this time and whether he can get people to stay in the White House, because it was a revolving door. His national security advisor kept changing, chief of staff changed. It was very hard for people to stay on board with Donald Trump, and I think he will.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 42nd President of the United States, the Honorable William J. Clinton, accompanied by the Honorable Hillary Rodham Clinton.
how she smiles, but what she's really thinking inside her.
Yes, and forever associated with that phrase, basket of deplorables, which is how she described Donald Trump's supporters.
And really, unfortunately for the Democrats, it's precisely language like that that further alienated people that already thought that they didn't stand for them anymore.
Yeah, and 3 women who've tried to become US president. And you can't help wondering whether there isn't an element of sexism at play still in the United States. Given how long ago the UK had a woman as Prime Minister.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 43rd President of the United States, the Honorable George W. Bush, accompanied by Mrs. Laura Bush.
So, but by comparison, I mean, George Bush there is something of an old-style Republican. We thought he was pretty radical in his day, but compared with Donald Trump, you know, there is this sort of state capture that's gone on of the Republican Party by Donald Trump.
But there's such a big difference between the kind of neocon ideology that the Wolfowitz and Rumsfeld and Cheney view of the world, which was still an ordered view, but the Trumpian view is so transactional and so opportunistic.
Yeah, it's another step on from those so-called neoconservatives who were around George Bush when he launched
Ladies
the
and
Iraq War
gentlemen,
in
the
2003.
44th President of the United States, the Honorable Barack H. Obama. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chief Justice of the United States, the Honorable John G. Roberts, Jr., and the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States. Tiffany Trump and Barron Trump.
President Clinton there, he's been here before a few times.
He has. He's becoming apart from Joe Biden, of course, who's older than he is, one of the senior statesmen. There's Barron Trump, President's youngest son.
Interestingly, when President Biden welcomed President Trump to the White House for tea, the words he used were, "Welcome home." One wonders what kind of note he may have left in the Oval Office. What level of, there's no money, I spent it all.
Well, Joe Biden, from the very point that Kamala Harris lost, has been the model of grace, really. I mean, you couldn't disagree with Donald Trump more, but he's been gracious in the way that he's handed over. So that is Team Trump right there in front of us.
It certainly is.
I wouldn't like to put a figure on the net worth of all those people, given that the world's richest man, Elon Musk, is just one of them. On the right there.
It's unusual for a family to behave in such a dynastic manner. It really is something.
Yes, and it's why President Trump loves the British royal family, gets on famously with Prince William, we're told, gets on extremely well with King Salman of Saudi Arabia and his son, the Crown Prince. This is a man who not only likes doing deals, but he likes doing deals with family involvement. If Prince William were to say to Donald Trump, please don't impose tariffs on the United Kingdom, that would probably have more effect than Sir Keir Starmer doing it, frankly. Not that Prince William's going to do that, but...
Ladies and gentlemen, escorting Dr. Biden and Mr. Emhoff, the Republican staff director of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, Ms. Emily Leviner, the Senate Secretary for the Minority, the Honorable Gary Myrick, the House of Representatives Chief Administrative Officer, the Honorable Catherine Spindor, and Mr. Bruce Fisher. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Jill Biden and Mr. Douglas Emhoff.
Few months, the implications of Jill Biden's husband's refusal to step down early enough.
To allow the Democrats to mount a more credible campaign, yeah, just completing your thought there. So Jill Biden looks as if she's delighted to be on her way out, doesn't she?
Well, it must be quite a thing for a husband who had tried to gain the presidency so many times and finally got there, and then ultimately, irrespective of his policies and his politicking, was almost certainly defeated by age.
Yeah, I think that's fair comment. I think
he
didn't
she's waving to
realise
us.
for how long that that he couldn't keep going, that he couldn't go back to the American people in the state that he was in. And of course, there was that presidential debate which exposed him.
Yeah, there have been few public political meltdown, for want of a better word. So, I am delighted to say that we have our esteemed colleague, Kieran Moodley, joining us from DC. He has been out and about today talking to the many people who had made it to DC, ostensibly to attend the inauguration, but of course, now that it has been moved indoors, certainly people that have traveled far and wide and were going to be on the Mall were looking for something else to do. So, Kieran, can you hear us? You're there.
Yes, I can indeed, Keme. Yep.
So you've been
Yeah,
down
I mean,
talking to the crowds. What did you discover?
Well, I mean, as you say, some disappointment, obviously, that the inauguration was not out on the mall so that people could join, but people were still queuing up very early on for hours and hours to try and get into the Capital One Arena. Obviously, there's only about 20,000 people who can fit in there, but people didn't seem to mind about queuing in the cold or whether they might not get a seat. There is a real sense, talking to people there, that this is a very much a different moment to 8 years ago, not just because there aren't as many protests against Donald Trump. That could be for a number of reasons, a sense of resignation from the opposition, the fact that he did win the popular vote this time, but also a sense that Donald Trump has learned the lessons from his first term, that he has got more loyalists behind him, that he has learned the lessons of what went wrong, of what they might say is the deep state up against them, and that now he will really deliver on the promises that he was re-elected on for this big comeback. But I think also, there is that sense that we keep on talking about of this mood shift, this vibe shift, that even if Donald Trump's popular vote victory was quite small, that the whole mood in this country is one of this is the new normal, that Donald Trump has ushered in a new political era over the last decade, and that this is what we have to become accustomed to. But I was talking to one particular Trump supporter who said he was originally a sort of centrist Democrat. He was from Kentucky, and he was saying that, he has all this support for Donald Trump, but he does question a bit. When you look at the inauguration pictures you're looking at right now, and he sees sort of Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and those individuals, he is still a bit concerned about Donald Trump getting too close to those people and giving into their arguments and not agreeing with what most of the people here want, which is America first. It is those policies for the working man, the working people, rather than for what, Joe Biden has called that sort of oligarchy. So that's really the mood you're getting here, a vibe shift, but also one of caution as well.
And that's one of the interesting tensions inside the MAGA camp, is that not everybody is singing from the same hymn sheet, and one wonders how long it's going to take for some of those tensions to start to surface.
Yes, exactly. I mean, already you have reports that Vivek Ramaswamy, who was going to be part of that Doge group with Elon Musk, he's no longer in that, for example. Donald Trump is a figure who unites a broad church, and a broad church which goes from sort of the Elon Musk sort of tech bros who, in many ways they sort of do want electric vehicles. They do want, HB1 visas and that certain type of thing. And then the other side, the sort of America First nationalist side, which has those tensions. And Donald Trump sort of rides those two quite easily. He's not really ideological. So it really comes down to what happens on those sort of singular bases. And I think also you have to remember that those tensions also are there within the people who voted for Donald Trump. Because, talking to some of the supporters, there are the MAGA faithful, but there are those people who gave their vote to Donald Trump because of the economy, right? They didn't give their vote to him because they believed in every single thing he believes, whether it's a deep state sort of conspiracy against him, they don't agree with what happened on January the 6th, but they gave him their vote, a lot of those people who might not have voted before, because of the economy. And those are the things he'll be judged on. And all those other issues, those tensions within that Republican camp, those are the things which could really turn off people who voted for him when it comes to those midterm elections in the next 2 years. And I think that's why you see this idea of this rush of 100 executive orders, because Donald Trump knows he has a 2-year period before those midterms to really try and get stuff done and convince people that he knows what he's doing.
But by the same token, and this is something Jonathan and I were just discussing, he can't run again. So do the midterms matter as much to him as they would do to a president seeking a second term?
Perhaps not. I mean, I think he will still need, and I mean, this is where the executive orders come in, right? Executive orders are things that that he, as a president, is telling he wants the federal government to do. Some of those things he doesn't necessarily, he can say that, but some of those things Congress may override, or even the courts. He will still need that House and Senate in those final 2 years, depending on what happens down the line. And I think, it's a great issue in terms of what happens for this MAGA movement. I think the big question we always ask is not just talking about this 4-year period, is what happens after Donald Trump, who takes up that mantle. Because, I remember being out on the campaign trail and talking to some people who weren't convinced maybe that J.D. Vance was the right individual. That's a big question, beyond those midterms, is where does this movement go beyond Donald Trump, who is such a unifying figure?
Somebody just walked behind you with a huge Make America Great Again sign. What is the vibe? Are people excited?
I think talking to people who are queuing up at the Capital One Arena, they are definitely excited. I think there is that sense, as I was saying, that this is really a sea change, a turning point. This is very different to 8 years ago. It feels like all the vibes and whatever happened before has shifted. This country has shifted. The protests aren't here anymore. There is a sort of, in many ways, a capitulation to what Donald Trump has stood for over the last decade, and this is the new normal. This is what it's going to be like for the next few years, and there's an excitement that Donald Trump will, having learned his lessons from the first term, really push through his agenda. And I think, when we talk about those executive orders, that's what's that all about. It's about sending a message not just to his supporters, but also the opposition, that real sense of this sort of almost blitzkrieg of executive orders from all these different issues: immigration, electric vehicles, the civil service within the government, really sort of sending a message that he wants to do stuff, but also get his opposition completely, flabbergasted at all these different things and not knowing how to respond to it. So there is that real sort of optimism of a sort of a new dawn in America, as it were. But I think, as always, these inaugurations, we focus on the supporters out on the streets and we focus on the opposition feeling wounded. The Democrats did lose the election. The popular vote was lost. But remember, it wasn't a huge mandate in many ways, in the sense that the popular vote was only 1.5%. There was a couple of 100,000 votes in those swing states. I think we have to remember that might change.
Please welcome the Armed Forces Chorus and America's tenor, Christopher D. Macchio.
We are about to be serenaded from the rotunda. Kieran, thank you very much indeed. Jonathan, the proceedings continue.
So Chris Macchio, Italian-American from New York, one of Donald Trump's favorites, and sang at the Republican convention.
Oh, America, you're calling. I can hear you calling me. You are calling me to be true to thee, true to thee. I will be.
So, the new Vice President, former Senator J.D. Vance, is about to enter the rotunda to be officially administered the vice presidential oath. Kieran, a final word from you. Just how cold is it out there?
It's amazingly not too cold. I'm sort of wearing about, I think, 2 long johns and various thermals. It's not too... So it is, you can feel the wind chill, and it's pretty slippery, but there are still many people out. As I was saying, outside the Capital One Arena, there are still thousands there queuing up to try and get one of those seats. So it is pretty cold. We obviously know that's one of the reasons why it was moved inside, but that hasn't deterred so many people from coming out here on the streets. Because remember, you know, remember 4 years ago, this capital was completely different. You know, it was because of COVID, because of after January 6th. The streets I was here were completely dead and empty. There was nothing going on here. So, you know, I think because of what happened 4 years ago, and even 8 years ago, when there was that real sort of much more tension and sort of animosity in the air during the first inauguration, if this inauguration now feels very much different, there feels much more positivity amongst many people in the crowd here, and I think that's why so many people have come out onto the streets this time, even though the inauguration is not happening out along the Mall, and they cannot see what's happening in the Rotunda unless they go to one of the sort of watch parties, and many of them can't get to the Capital One Arena. So despite the cold, people are still coming out here in their droves.
And of course, the big difference when you have a Democrat president being anointed in DC is that given it's a Democrat city, a lot of the people that turn out are from the city. But when you have somebody like Trump, who's from out of town, the people that come to celebrate him are typically more often from around the country. It is a different flavor of celebration, if you like.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, just speaking to some of the people outside the Capital One Arena, there were people from
And
Kentucky,
we are just
from
seeing
New
President
Mexico,
Trump
from Alabama.
walk into the Rotunda. And Kieran, we will thank you very kindly for joining us, taking the temperature in a very cold DC out on the street, talking to the people as President Trump walks for the second time to be inaugurated formally as President of the United States.
Melania Trump, looking every inch the fashion model that she once was. Kept a very low profile during the first Trump presidency, not least because she had a son in school, in high school.
Towered over
him, by him. There's Baron Trump, yeah.
There is a hushed silence as people anticipate
Ladies and gentlemen, escorting the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States, Ranking Member of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, the Honorable Deb Fischer, House Democratic Leader, the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries, and Senate Majority Secretary, the Honorable Robert Duncan. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, the Honorable Joseph R. Biden Jr., and Vice President of the United States, the Honorable Kamala Devi Harris.
So Joe Biden slips into a happy retirement. What does Kamala Harris do now?
That's a very good question. There was so much hope riding on her presidential campaign amongst the Democrats. They raised huge amounts of money. And in the end, if she'd had more time, would she have been more successful? I'm not sure, actually. I think Donald Trump was a very hard force to stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, escorting the Vice President-elect, the Executive Director for the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, Mr. Michael Wagner, Senate Deputy Sergeant-at-Arms and Doorkeeper, Jason Bell, and House Deputy Sergeant-at-Arms, Mr. Sean Keating.
Everybody's famous for 30 seconds.
When Warhol comes to Washington.
I pointed out the statue of Lincoln on the right there. And it will be the Lincoln Bible that's used to swear in J.D. Vance as Vice President.
There's a fine tradition of presidents and vice president-elect choosing
Ladies
very
and
carefully
gentlemen,
which
the
Bibles
Vice
they
President-elect of the United States, the Honorable J.D. Vance.
So the former critic of Donald Trump, who was brought back into the fold. Notoriously difficult job being the spare to the President of the United States. So few of them make it to the presidency themselves.
That is his wife, is it not? Behind on the left.
It is.
So, like many Americans, a very interesting family relationship with immigration. She born of Indian parents, and of course J.D. Vance, very hard line on illegal immigration, and the whole debate around who gets to come to America is something that is no doubt dinner table chat.
Well, I think it's the central plank of the first phase of the Trump presidency. It's going to be the highlight of the executive orders that we're expecting to be issued by the president later today. He's going to declare, we're told reliably, he's going to declare a national emergency on the border and attempt to end the birthright of those born in the United States.
Ladies and gentlemen,
From
escorting
parents
the
who are here
President-elect,
illegally.
the Staff Director for the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, Elizabeth Farah, House Sergeant-at-Arms, the Honorable William P. McFarland, Senate Sergeant-at-Arms and Doorkeeper, the Honorable Jennifer A. Hemingway, Senate Majority Leader, the Honorable John Thune, and the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, House Democratic Leader, the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries, House Majority Leader, the Honorable Steve Scalise, Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Mike Johnson, Senate Democratic Leader, the Honorable Charles E. Schumer, Ranking Member of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, the Honorable Deb Fischer, and Chairwoman of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, the Honorable Amy Klobuchar. Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect of the United States, the Honorable Donald John Trump.
So the man who claimed the election had been stolen last time, a false claim, is now back, the clear winner of the presidential election.
Did you just notice that he air-kissed his own wife there? It wasn't even a real kiss. It is an extraordinary comeback.
Very formal. Extraordinary comeback, yes.
He took the entire system on at its own game, double bluffed it, and beat the House.
Well, I looking at these pictures, I think of those January the 6th rioters who were in the same rotunda, whooping and jeering and saying they were there to kind of replace, to stand up for the truth. The election had been stolen, and in the event, Donald Trump is there by having won another term.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Please welcome the chairwoman of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, the Honorable Amy Klobuchar.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 60th presidential inauguration. Today, President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Vance will take their oaths of office, and we will witness the peaceful transfer of power at the heart of our democracy. For the past year, I've chaired the inaugural ceremony committee, which includes the leadership of Congress from both parties. We thank the committee and Capitol staff and law enforcement who worked so hard over the last year, and especially the last 3 days. You've done a beautiful job, and you have shown grace under pressure. Our theme this year is our enduring democracy. The presence of so many presidents and vice presidents here today is truly a testament to that endurance. We welcome President Biden and Dr. Biden. We welcome Vice President Harris and Doug Emhoff, President Obama, President Clinton and Secretary Clinton, President Bush and Laura Bush, Vice President Pence, Vice President Quayle and Marilyn Quayle. The justices of the United States Supreme Court are with us, all 9 of them I counted, and of course the Trump and Vance families. This ceremony marks what will soon be 250 years of our democracy. It is the moment when leaders, elevated by the will of the people, promise to be faithful to our Constitution, to cherish and defend it. It is the moment when they become, as we all should be, the guardians of our country. Through war and peace, through adversity and prosperity, we hold this inauguration every 4 years, and today it falls on Martin Luther King Day. A further reminder that we must strive to uphold the values enshrined in our Constitution, the freedoms, the liberties, and, as is inscribed on the entrance of the United States Supreme Court, equal justice under law. But what makes this moment more than a passing ceremony is all who are watching it across the country, the people of this nation, the ordinary people doing extraordinary things. President Kennedy, who at one point worked as a senator in this building and would often walk through this very rotunda, once said, "In a democracy, every citizen, regardless of interest in politics, holds office. Every one of us is in a position of responsibility." With that responsibility of citizenship comes an obligation not to seek out malice, as President Lincoln once reminded us, but to view others with a generosity of spirit despite our differences. With that responsibility of leadership comes an obligation to stand our ground when we must and find common ground when we can. With everything swirling around us, the hot mess of division, it is on all of us, to quote an incredible songwriter who just happened to be born in my state, to ensure that our nation's democracy is our shelter from the storm. There's a reason
Jonathan,
this
just
ceremony
listening
takes
to
place
the words
at the
there from
Capitol.
Senator Klobuchar,
In other
just picking out a
countries, it
few of
might be
them.
in a presidential palace
Enduring
or a gilded
democracy,
executive office building.
not to
Here
seek
it
out
is
malice.
traditionally held at the Capitol.
There is such a contrast when one hears those very, very old school American dream, American democracy, the very American mission. And we contrast that with what happened on January 6th in this very building, and the person that is so connected with that, even though he was eventually not impeached. How do you read that?
and Vice President.
Well, I think
Let
if the
us remember
Democrats could
that
carry
the
out a
power
restraining
of
order on
those
Donald Trump, they
in
would.
this
And
room comes from the
I think it's a
people.
very veiled, very
Construction
polite way of
workers who
saying,
build our
as
country.
Joe Biden
The
said
teachers
last
and
week, that
healthcare
he's worried
workers
at the
who
direction
nurture us,
the country
troops
is heading
defending
in,
our freedoms.
the
And
concentration
yes,
of
the
power,
firefighters in Los
the
Angeles
potential
putting themselves
overruling
on
or
the line
overriding of
for
the
us.
sort of norms of democracy, whether it's freedom of the press. I think actually America is stronger than that. I think its institutions are stronger than that. The Supreme Court is still the
Our
ultimate
democracy's
arbiter of the law in the
strength
United
and
States.
grit must
But I think by the
match
same token,
theirs.
look at those people,
May
look at all
God
those
bless
tech
our
titans lined
nation.
up there.
Thank you.
I mean, it's like something from the 19th century, and when the robber barons ruled the roost. An enormous concentration of power in that room. Even though this is a president who says he's there for the little guy and for everybody.
And when one thinks of Musk, for example, of course, unelected.
Good
Yeah.
afternoon.
Absolutely.
Endurance through the years is the ultimate test. To persevere through time is the truest measure of an idea, an institution, and a nation. Our founders wrote the Constitution so that America could withstand all the twists and turns of time. They wrote it to guide us and to preserve forever our right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But as much as the truths and principles enshrined in our Constitution remain the same, our democracy promises the people the power to change, to chart their own destiny. That's the beauty. That is the importance of democracy. It allows the endurance, the permanence of a nation through change. It allows nations like our United States both to avoid the obstacles and to seize the opportunities God has placed before us, all while staying true to our founding principles. Today is our country's 60th inauguration ceremony. Like all the others before it, it is a celebration of our right to set our uniquely American course. The past several years have been trying at times for many Americans, and also for the nations of the free world that we humbly strive to lead. In November, Americans chose again to steer this nation towards greatness, the secure, safe, and prosperous future that our founders envisioned for all of us. And today, we celebrate not only their decision to do so, but also the simple right and wisdom of a free people to make their own choice so that their nation might endure.
A version
And now,
of this
allow me to welcome
handover has
Archbishop
happened
Timothy Dolan
so many times.
and Reverend Franklin Graham.
the first
will
inauguration in
deliver our
1782.
invitation. Please rise.
Of course, shortly after the United States won its independence, when it was then in various stages a colony.
Be still and know that I am God, supreme among the nations, supreme on the earth.
So this is
Let us
Cardinal
pray.
Timothy Dolan from New York.
Remembering General George Washington on his knees at Valley Forge, recalling Abraham Lincoln at his second inaugural, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Remembering General George Patton's instructions to his soldiers as they began the Battle of the Bulge 8 decades ago: pray, pray when fighting, pray alone, pray with others, pray by night, pray by day. Observing the birthday of the Reverend Martin Luther King, who warned, without God, our efforts turn to ashes. We, blessed citizens of this one nation under God, humbled by our claim that in God we trust, gather indeed this Inauguration Day to pray for our President Donald J. Trump, his family, his advisors, his cabinet, his aspirations, his vice president, for the Lord's blessings upon Joseph Biden, for our men and women in uniform, for each other whose hopes are stoked this new year, this Inauguration Day. We cannot err in relying upon that prayer from the Bible, upon which our president will soon place his hand in oath, as we make our own the supplications of King Solomon for wisdom as he began his governance. God of our fathers, in your wisdom you set man to govern your creatures, to govern in holiness and justice, to render justice with integrity. Give our leader wisdom, for he is your servant, aware of his own weakness and brevity of life. If wisdom which comes not from you be not with him, he shall be held in no esteem. Send wisdom from heavens that she may be with him, that he may know your designs. Please, God, bless America. Please, mend her every flaw. You are the God in whom we trust, who lives and reigns forever and ever. Amen.
The next speaker, an evangelist, preacher, Franklin Graham.
Mr. President, the last 4 years, there are times I'm sure you thought it was pretty dark.
MPs in the UK have called
But look what God has
for
done.
him in the past
We
to be
praise him and
banned
give
from
him
the UK
glory.
because of what they claimed at that time were his homophobic and Islamophobic views, which were, they said, likely to promote
Let us pray.
prejudice and hatred. The son of
Our Father,
Billy
our
Graham,
God, thou
who
hast said, blessed is
many
the
people will
nation
remember.
whose God is the Lord. As the prophet Daniel prayed, blessed be the name of God forever and ever. For wisdom and might are his. He changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings. He raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. Our Father, today, as President Donald J. Trump takes the oath of office once again, we come to say thank you, O Lord our God. Father, when Donald Trump's enemies thought he was down and out, you and you alone saved his life and raised him up with strength and power by your mighty hand. We pray for President Trump that you'll watch over, protect, guide, direct him. Give him your wisdom from your throne on high. We ask that you would bless him and that our nation would be blessed through him. We also ask that you would bless and protect Melania as First Lady. We thank you for the beauty, the warmth, and grace that she shows not only to this nation, but to the whole world. We thank you for Vice President-elect J.D. Vance and his wife Usha and their young family. May he be a strength to President Trump, to stand beside him, to hold up his arms like Aaron held up the arms of Moses in the midst of battle. The prophet Samuel reminded the people, it was you that brought them up from the land of Egypt. And he said, now stand still that I may reason with you before the Lord. So Father, we take this moment to stand still, to remember the great things that you have done for this nation. Thank you for the protection, the bounty, the freedoms that we so enjoy. We remember to keep our eyes fixed on you, and may our hearts be inclined to your voice. We know that America can never be great again if we turn our backs on you. We ask for your help, and we pray all of this in the name of the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, your Son, my Savior, and our Redeemer, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Associate Justice Kavanaugh to administer the Vice Presidential Oath of Office.
And Jonathan, while we wait for Justice Kavanaugh to take to the stage, what do you make of President Trump's choice of speakers?
Well, he owes a lot to the evangelical church. Timothy Dolan is a Catholic cardinal, the first preacher we heard speaking. It's interesting that Brett Kavanaugh, a very controversial pick for the Supreme Court, there were allegations of sexual misconduct, he was Donald Trump's pick, managed to push it through the Congress, and he's now the swing voter on the Supreme Court, so he has a very powerful position on the big
Please raise your
issues of
right
the day.
hand and repeat after me. I, James David Vance, do solemnly swear
I, James David Vance, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the same,
and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office
on which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Vice President.
And that oath took place on Abraham Lincoln's Bible, the Bible used by Abraham Lincoln in 1861. A month later, the Civil War broke out in America. And the Bible that Donald Trump is going to use will be the Presbyterian Bible that was the possession of his mother from Scotland, a family heirloom.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chief Justice Roberts to administer the presidential oath of office.
And of course, that connection with Scotland and with his mother's past is something British diplomats, Prime Minister, that old family connection are hoping will prove very important in the years to come in terms of the relationship between America and the United Kingdom.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
There you have it. Number 47.
Yeah, he's back. He was looking a bit tetchy while he was waiting to be inaugurated. He looks like a man who's in a hurry to get going and to be back at the desk in the Oval Office.
Well, from what we've heard about his intentions, there is a huge amount of legislation via what we call executive orders ready to hit the desks of Washington officials across many, many sectors. Energy, trade, immigration.
Yeah, I think immigration is the big one. He's talking about what he calls the largest deportation program in American history. And he's also talking about finishing that famous wall between Mexico and the United States. About 500 miles of it have been built so far, and there are another 1,500 to go. And of course that stopped during the Biden presidency. And as you say, energy, environment, pulling out of the Paris Agreement on climate change, not obliging American car manufacturers to meet emissions targets, drilling in the Alaskan National Reserve.
And getting rid of targets on things like electric vehicles. On immigration, one of the things that has been floated is that he intends to remove the automatic citizenship birthright. If you are born in America, you are an American. From the birth of this country up until now, it has been an inalienable right, to borrow a phrase, that if you are born in America, you are an American. And I just wonder, this is a topic that has not yet been really delved into at depth, how this is not just a symbolic move. it is actually a change to the nature of what it is to be American and to strive for the American dream. And I really wonder what impact ending birthright citizenship eligibility will have.
Well, he may not be able to pull that off. And Donald Trump is right that, it's a major draw. If you get to the United States and you have a child, your child becomes an American citizen. But it may well be in violation of the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution if Donald Trump tries to remove that birthright. And if that is the case, then he's going to have to get it ratified through Congress, but also through a majority of the state legislatures across the country.
2/3, right?
So it's a very big ask. Building the wall, okay, fine. He'll get on with that. He's also talking about having the drugs cartels named and declared as terrorist groups, deploying more of the National Guard to the border. And Stephen Miller, one of his key lieutenants,
has been operating very quietly in the background.
Very quietly, was in the first Trump White House and has been plotting these executive orders, specifically on immigration in particular, because he wants it as a quick win. I think he wants results very quickly. He wants to see people deported out of the United States. And I think the threat will be for those countries that don't accept it. Well, we'll think about imposing tariffs on trade with you. I mean, that is a threat he will use with the new president of Mexico. And of course, he's talking about renaming the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America.
I mean, this is such red meat to MAGA Central, isn't it? These topics, these ideas, whether or not they actually happen, symbolically, they're huge.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a question mark over results here, and once all the promises he's making, they're very big promises. What things he's saying he's going to do, and if he doesn't deliver them, he's going to have to deliver something at first, and hope that people don't remember the rest of it. I was talking earlier about the summit he held with Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea. Great public event. Did it result in any big change? No. Did it win Donald Trump the Nobel Peace Prize, which he says he desperately wants? No. So he tends to go for big ceremonial occasions and big splashes that don't necessarily have the follow-through that he wants. And of course, the Democrats, when they've recovered from this blistering election loss, will be mobilizing. Their lawyers will be mobilizing. A lot of this is going to go through the courts, everything that Donald Trump is trying to do, because although he has the power to make these executive orders, and we're expecting something like 200 of them in a very short time later today, they can be challenged.
And you mentioned Stephen Miller. I mean, the fact is, the Trump operation now, his understanding of the levers of government and the administration, he knows what he's doing this time around. And there is a machine behind him that has been hand-picked not just for loyalty, but for expertise. So one expects a large portion of what he wants to do to be much more efficient.
I don't see much expertise in those cabinet picks. I see ideological commitment. And of course, they've got to persuade the whole federal administration to toe the line. And the federal administration that they swear they want to make a lot smaller.
We were just listening to the Naval Academy Glee Club, and we anticipate that the President will be shortly making his inaugural address. And we will, of course, be listening very carefully to see to what extent it is a continuation of the speech he gave the first time he was president, whether he is emboldened or whether he is in any way mollified, whether he attempts to bring this very, very, very divided country together, or whether he continues to throw red meat.
It is my honor and pleasure to introduce to you the 45th and the 47th President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump.
Thank you very much, everybody. Well, thank you very, very much. Vice President Vance, Speaker Johnson, Senator Thune, Chief Justice Roberts, Justices of the United States Supreme Court, President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and my fellow citizens. The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first. Our sovereignty will be reclaimed. Our safety will be restored. The scales of justice will be rebalanced. The vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end. And our top priority will be to create a nation that is proud, prosperous, and free. America will soon be greater, stronger, and far more exceptional than ever before. I return to the presidency confident and optimistic that we are at the start of a thrilling new era of national success. A tide of change is sweeping the country, sunlight is pouring over the entire world, and America has the chance to seize this opportunity like never before. But first, we must be honest about the challenges we face. While they are plentiful, they will be annihilated by this great momentum that the world is now witnessing in the United States of America. As we gather today, our government confronts a crisis of trust. For many years, a radical and corrupt establishment has extracted power and wealth from our citizens while the pillars of our society lay broken and seemingly in complete disrepair. We now have a government that cannot manage even a simple crisis at home, while at the same time stumbling into a continuing catalog of catastrophic events abroad. It fails to protect our magnificent, law-abiding American citizens, but provides sanctuary and protection for dangerous criminals, many from prisons and mental institutions that have illegally entered our country from all over the world. We have a government that has given unlimited funding to the defense of foreign borders, but refuses to defend American borders or, more importantly, its own people. Our country can no longer deliver services in times of emergency, as recently shown by the wonderful people of North Carolina, been treated so badly. And other states who are still suffering from a hurricane that took place many months ago. Or more recently, Los Angeles, where we're watching fires still tragically burn. From weeks ago, without even a token of defense, they're raging through the houses and communities, even affecting some of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in our country, some of whom are sitting here right now. They don't have a home any longer. That's interesting. But we can't let this happen. Everyone is unable to do anything about it. That's going to change. We have a public health system that does not deliver in times of disaster, yet more money is spent on it than any country anywhere in the world. And we have an education system that teaches our children to be ashamed of themselves in many cases, to hate our country despite the love that we try so desperately to provide to them. All of this will change starting today, and it will change very quickly. My recent election is a mandate to completely and totally reverse a horrible betrayal and all of these many betrayals that have taken place, and to give the people back their faith, their wealth, their democracy, and indeed their freedom. From this moment on, America's decline is over. Our liberties and our nation's glorious destiny will no longer be denied, and we will immediately restore the integrity, competency, and loyalty of America's government. Over the past 8 years, I have been tested and challenged more than any president in our 250-year history, and I've learned a lot along the way. The journey to reclaim our republic has not been an easy one, that I can tell you. Those who wish to stop our cause have tried to take my freedom and indeed to take my life. Just a few months ago in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. But I felt then, and believe even more so now, that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again. Thank you. Thank you very much. That is why each day under our administration of American patriots, we will be working to meet every crisis with dignity and power and strength. We will move with purpose and speed to bring back hope, prosperity, safety, and peace for citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed. For American citizens, January 20th, 2025 is Liberation Day. It is my hope that our recent presidential election will be remembered as the greatest and most consequential election in the history of our country. As our victory showed, the entire nation is rapidly unifying behind our agenda with dramatic increases in support from virtually every element of our society, young and old, men and women, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, urban, suburban, rural, and very importantly, we had a powerful win in all 7 swing states, and the popular vote, we won by millions of people. To the Black and Hispanic communities, I want to thank you for the tremendous outpouring of love and trust that you have shown me with your vote. We set records, and I will not forget it. I've heard your voices in the campaign, and I look forward to working with you in the years to come. Today is Martin Luther King Day, and his honor, this will be a great honor, but in his honor, we will strive together to make his dream a reality. We will make his dream come true. Thank you. Thank you. National unity is now returning to America, and confidence and pride is soaring like never before. In everything we do, my administration will be inspired by a strong pursuit of excellence and unrelenting success. We will not forget our country. We will not forget our Constitution, and we will not forget our God. Can't do that. Today, I will sign a series of historic executive orders. With these actions, we will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense. First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border. All illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came. We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy. I will end the practice of catch and release. And I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country. Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And by invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks, bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities. As Commander-in-Chief, I have no higher responsibility than to defend our country from threats and invasions, and that is exactly what I am going to do. We will do it at a level that nobody's ever seen before. Next, I will direct all members of my cabinet to marshal the vast powers at their disposal to defeat what was record inflation and rapidly bring down costs and prices. The inflation crisis was caused by massive overspending and escalating energy prices, and that is why today I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill. America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again, right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. We will be a rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it. With my actions today, we will end the Green New Deal, and we will revoke the electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto industry and keeping my sacred pledge to our great American auto workers. In other words, you'll be able to buy the car of your choice. We will build automobiles in America again at a rate that nobody could have dreamt possible just a few years ago. And thank you to the auto workers of our nation for your inspiring vote of confidence. We did tremendously with their vote. I will immediately begin the overhaul of our trade system to protect American workers and families. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens. For this purpose, we are establishing the External Revenue Service to collect all tariffs, duties, and revenues. It will be massive amounts of money pouring into our Treasury, coming from foreign sources. The American dream will soon be back and thriving like never before to restore competence and effectiveness to our federal government. My administration will establish the brand new Department of Government Efficiency. After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents, something I know something about. We will not allow that to happen. It will not happen again. Under my leadership, we will restore fair, equal, and impartial justice under the constitutional rule of law. And we are going to bring law and order back to our cities. This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. This week, I will reinstate any service members who were unjustly expelled from our military for objecting to the COVID vaccine mandate with full back pay. And I will sign an order to stop our warriors from being subjected to radical political theories and social experiments while on duty. It's going to end immediately. Our armed forces will be freed to focus on their sole mission, defeating America's enemies. Like in 2017, we will again build the strongest military the world has ever seen. We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier. I'm pleased to say that as of yesterday, one day before I assumed office, the hostages in the Middle East are coming back home to their families. Thank you. America will reclaim its rightful place as the greatest, most powerful, most respected nation on earth, inspiring the awe and admiration of the entire world. A short time from now, we are going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and we will restore the name of a great president, William McKinley, to Mount McKinley, where it should be and where it belongs. President McKinley made our country very rich through tariffs and through talent. He was a natural businessman and gave Teddy Roosevelt the money for many of the great things he did, including the Panama Canal, which has foolishly been given to the country of Panama after the United States. The United States, I mean, think of this, spent more money than ever spent on a project before and lost 38,000 lives in the building of the Panama Canal. We have been treated very badly from this foolish gift that should have never been made, and Panama's promise to us has been broken. The purpose of our deal and the spirit of our treaty has been totally violated. American ships are being severely overcharged and not treated fairly in any way, shape, or form, and that includes the United States Navy. And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back. Above all, my message to Americans today is that it is time for us to once again act with courage, vigor, and the vitality of history's greatest civilization. So as we liberate our nation, we will lead it to new heights of victory and success. We will not be deterred. Together we will end the chronic disease epidemic and keep our children safe, healthy, and disease-free. The United States will once again consider itself a growing nation, one that increases our wealth, expands our territory, builds our cities, raises our expectations, and carries our flag into new and beautiful horizons. And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. Ambition is the lifeblood of a great nation, and right now our nation is more ambitious than any other. There's no nation like our nation. Americans are explorers, builders, innovators, entrepreneurs, and pioneers. The spirit of the frontier is written into our hearts. The call of the next great adventure resounds from within our souls. Our American ancestors turned a small group of colonies on the edge of a vast continent into a mighty republic of the most extraordinary citizens on earth. No one comes close. Americans pushed thousands of miles through a rugged land of untamed wilderness. They crossed deserts, scaled mountains, braved untold dangers, won the Wild West, ended slavery, rescued millions from tyranny, lifted billions from poverty, harnessed electricity, split the atom, launched mankind into the heavens, and put the universe of human knowledge into the palm of the human hand. If we work together, there is nothing we cannot do and no dream we cannot achieve. Many people thought it was impossible for me to stage such a historic political comeback. But as you see today, here I am. The American people have spoken. I stand before you now as proof that you should never believe that something is impossible to do. In America, the impossible is what we do best. From New York to Los Angeles, from Philadelphia to Phoenix, from Chicago to Miami, from Houston to right here in Washington, D.C., our country was forged and built by the generations of patriots who gave everything they had for our rights and for our freedom. They were farmers and soldiers, cowboys and factory workers, steel workers and coal miners, police officers and pioneers who pushed onward, marched forward, and let no obstacle defeat their spirit or their pride. Together they laid down the railroads, raised up the skyscrapers, built great highways, won 2 world wars, defeated fascism and communism, and triumphed over every single challenge that they faced. After all we have been through together, we stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in American history. With your help, we will restore America, promise, and we will rebuild the nation that we love, and we love it so much. We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. So to every parent who dreams for their child, and every child who dreams for their future, I am with you, I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We are going to win like never before. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. In recent years, our nation has suffered greatly, but we are going to bring it back and make it great again, greater than ever before. We will be a nation like no other, full of compassion, courage, and exceptionalism. Our power will stop all wars and bring a new spirit of unity to a world that has been angry, violent, and totally unpredictable. America will be respected again and admired again, including by people of religion, faith, and goodwill. We will be prosperous. We will be proud. We will be strong, and we will win like never before. We will not be conquered. We will not be intimidated. We will not be broken, and we will not fail. From this day on, the United States of America will be a free, sovereign, and independent nation. We will stand bravely. We will live proudly. We will dream boldly, and nothing will stand in our way because we are Americans. The future is ours, and our golden age has just begun. Thank you. God bless America. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mike's up. And there you have it, President Trump's first address, well, his second inaugural address, because of course he's done it all before, but wow, there was a lot in that. And Jonathan, what started as a kind of pretty dour, almost angry and bitter blaming of his opponents rapidly turned into this huge list of incredibly bold and ambitious policy goals. And I'm just going to kind of pull out a few things that jumped out to me. Emergency on southern border, drill baby drill, only 2 genders, male and female, and this extraordinary idea, and I quote, the Panama Canal, we're taking it back.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've picked the right subject areas there. So you've got the environment, drill baby drill. In fact, it's more complicated than it appears. There were more drilling licenses under Biden than there were under Trump in his first term. But nevertheless, so Trump is talking about, I mean, America is already energy self-sufficient. It produces a surplus of energy. But yes, so drill baby drill, so drilling in in Alaska in particular. Cultural issues, there is only male and female. Really sort of reclaiming the legacy of Martin Luther King as his legacy of actually we're going to be colorblind. We're not going to give advantages to any one group over another.
And what do you make of him actually invoking MLK on MLK Day? The words he used, "Together we will make his dream come true."
Yeah,
I mean, how's that going to go down with African Americans?
Well, it's not going to go down well, and there weren't very many African Americans in the room there. But the Democrats, the Democrat kind of party leadership, as it were, the former presidents and vice presidents, all sitting there stony-faced. Bill Clinton looked at one moment; he just looked incredulous. He didn't quite believe what he was hearing, and so we've got the emergency at the border, the mass deportation of what he calls millions of illegal criminals.
And he called many of them, yeah, as you say, criminals, when obviously the evidence is not that, but still.
Yeah, and as you say...
Perhaps let's just listen to his first inaugural song. We know that's Carrie Underwood.
For amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
So that's Carrie Underwood, country star.
This is a country that is not backward in singing its own praises, so to speak.
It has more national anthems than any other country I know, unofficial national anthems.
And indeed, one of President Trump's closing comments referred very directly to American exceptionalism.
Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Fisher will now introduce the benediction clergy.
So, those issues that we were just starting to unpick, many of them which had been very well signposted in advance, but actually, did you think he would be as declarative and as bold?
I think it was, in many ways, it was more like a campaign speech, as if he was still on the campaign trail, than it was an inauguration speech. It wasn't. I was expecting him to say something about bringing the country together, but what he did was actually say, no, I am the country is me, everyone has come over to my way of thinking. So,
Almighty God,
I haven't seen
your prophet
a newly
Jeremiah
elected president
the streets of
at his inauguration so lay into his predecessor in the way that he did. So the golden age of America brings right now, We won't be
Blessed
taken
is the
advantage
one
of, sovereignty
who trusts
reclaimed.
in God.
A few veiled references to his
Thousands of years
own
later, this great
conviction.
nation which adopted
The weaponization
these
of the
words
Justice
as its
Department
motto,
will end.
In God we trust.
And we're just seeing
Stands at a
pictures
moment
right here of
historic
Rabbi Dr. Ari
opportunity.
Berman, who's president of
Americans
Yeshiva
are searching
University.
for meaning.
He will be followed, in
Our
fact, by an
merciful
imam,
Father,
Jonathan.
help us rise to
Yes,
meet
and-
this moment.
And we
Bless
saw
President
President
Donald
Trump
J.
there
Trump
say, my
and
life
Vice
was saved for a
President
reason.
J.D.
I was
Vance
saved by God
the
to make
strength
America
and
great
courage
again. So
to choose the
harking
right
back
and the
to
good.
the attempted assassination
Unite us
attempt.
around
A
our
very,
foundational biblical
claiming the
values
religious mantle
life
for what
and
he's
liberty,
doing.
service
He talked
and
about a horrible
sacrifice,
betrayal,
and
and that was as
especially
close as
of
he got
faith
to saying
and
that the
morality,
last election
which
was
George
stolen, which is
Washington
what he
called
believes.
the indispensable
America's
What he
support
still believes.
of
But he still
American
believes
prosperity.
America's decline
Guide our
is
schools
over,
and
that the
college
election he hopes will be the most
which have been
significant in
experiencing
history.
such
It will be a
unrest,
revolution of common
inspire
sense,
the
which
next
comes back to the
generation,
culture wars,
to
the war
pair
on woke.
progress with purpose,
The fact that there's
knowledge with
society is
wisdom,
colorblind, he
and
said,
truth
and
with
merit-based.
virtue.
There are only two genders, male
the
and
cry of
female.
the
And of course, we will be
American and
planting
Israeli,
the stars and stripes
whose
on
pain
planet
our
Mars. And
president
who's there in the
so
in the
acutely
auditorium to make that happen? Even
We
in
are
fact,
so
Elon Musk, who gave it the huge
for the
thumbs up.
3 young women
And
who
President Trump is
yesterday
absolutely
returned
right.
home.
America has a fascination with
pray
frontiers
that the
and
next 4
getting
years
to them
brings
and breaking
peace to
through them.
Israel
And space is
throughout
obviously,
the Middle East.
to quote a well-known television
Almighty
series, the
God,
final frontier. But
grant all
what was
Americans the
unsurprising to me,
opportunity
I think probably the
realize our
most
shared
surprising,
dream
was
of
he
a
had
life
said
filled with peace and
around
plenty,
about Christmas time that he
health and
wanted to
happiness,
take
compassion
Panama, or
and
take the
contribution.
canal back.
and this was wrapped
Stir
in with the
within
discussion
us
about Greenland as
the
well, right?
confidence
Yes,
to
exactly, with
rise
the
to this
potential for
moment.
buying
For while we
Greenland. And
trust
what he
in
said
God,
was that Panama's
God's trust is in
promise has
us,
been broken.
the
The promise, the
American
deal
people.
brokered by Jimmy Carter, which
America is
transferred
called
the
to
Panama
greatness,
Canal
to
to
be a
Panama.
beacon of light,
He said
and a
American
mover
ships were
of
being
history.
overcharged, that China was
May our
operating
nation
the
merit
canal. We
fulfillment
didn't give it to them.
of Jeremiah's
We're taking it
blessing.
back.
What do you think he
Like a
really
tree
means
planted
then?
by water, we shall not cease
Well,
to
I
bear
think
fruit. May
it's 40
all
years
of
ago
humanity
since the last inauguration took
experience
place
your love
indoors, that of
and
Ronald
your
Reagan.
blessing.
And what did Ronald Reagan
May it
do?
be
He
thy
invaded
will,
Panama.
and let us
You know,
say,
it's not
Amen.
it's not that it hasn't been done before. And
Let us pray for our
I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but he has, by laying it down in the inauguration, it's clearly, it's more than a passing fancy.
Yeah.
It's quite central to his campaign.
But brinkmanship and unpredictability are his calling cards. But if he then fails to deliver on some of this stuff, he's going to have himself something of a problem, isn't he? Because people are going to say, well, this, you know, you're a paper tiger, even though we know that he's got all these bold ideas.
Yes, but there again, if he persuades the Panamanians to reduce the fees on American ships, one of his clear gripes is the fact that the Chinese companies are present at both ends of the Panama Canal.
So they're the ones that are making the money.
So, yes, and a lot of money is being made. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But at the same time, and you square this circle, he says he's a peacemaker and he's a unifier, and he wants to end wars. So which is, will the real Donald Trump stand up? I mean, maybe we'll find out over Panama.
Time will tell. Let's dip back into the ceremony.
Let freedom ring, and because America is called to be a great nation, we believe that you will make this come true. So let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous hilltops of California, but God, we're asking you not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain, Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and every molehill in Mississippi, from every state, every city, every village, and every hamlet. And when we let freedom ring, we will be able to speed up that day where all of your children, black men and white men, Protestant and Catholic, Jew and Gentile, will be able to sing in the meaning of that old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank you, God Almighty. We are free at last. If you believe where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Come on, put your hands together and give your great God great glory.
And that was Pastor Lorenzo Sewell of 180 Church in Detroit. And he's going to be followed, we think, by Imam Husham
Almighty and
al-Husseini
eternal God,
of the Kabbalah Islamic
we gather
Education
here
Center.
today in reverence, joined in our shared hopes and dreams for our beloved nation.
In fact, we had Imam Husham. This is Reverend Father Frank Mann of the Roman Catholic Diocese
we turn our hearts
of Brooklyn.
to you, seeking your divine assistance and abundant blessings upon this pivotal moment in history. We come before you with profound gratitude for the many gifts you have bestowed upon our land. Thank you for the freedoms we cherish, for the strength of our communities, and for the resilience of our spirit. As our President and Vice President embrace their newly appointed roles, we humbly implore that your everlasting love and wisdom will envelop them. Grant them the clarity of mind to navigate the challenges that lie ahead, and the compassion to serve all citizens with fairness and integrity. May their hearts be filled with a giving spirit and sincere understanding for those whom they represent.
So,
May
Jonathan,
they be
whilst
beacons of hope
the
in times of
inauguration proceedings have been ongoing, we have had confirmation that President Trump intends to pull out of the Paris climate agreement. What does that actually mean? How long will it take? What are the impacts?
Well, it's the second time he's done it. And so it's no surprise. It actually, in terms of the UN mechanics of the Paris Agreement on climate change, it takes about a year for a country to fully exit from it. So it's more symbolic than anything else, but when the biggest economy of the world says, we're not doing this, we're not taking global warming seriously, then, you know, what kind of example does it set? And similarly, when you threaten in your inauguration speech to invade Panama, what kind of message does that send to autocrats in other parts of the world who might have designs on other places? It's quite, you know, it's dangerous talk either way, whether you're talking about the climate or whether you're talking about geopolitics.
Well, it is when, of course, his other stated ambition is to try and restrain China from any ambitions it may have with Taiwan. And it has, he has said very clearly he wants to try and end the war in Ukraine. So a lot of these ideas start to rub up against each other.
Yeah, he talked about the hostages being released in the Middle East. Interestingly, he didn't talk about Ukraine. I think he knows, having said initially he'll solve it in a day, he's now saying 6 months, and he knows it's a much harder nut to crack than was initially made out. And his bottom line will be there are going to be no American troops deployed in Europe to enforce any kind of ceasefire, and actually this is going to have to be done by the rest of NATO, which is going to have to increase its defence spending. Now, he didn't say any of that today because his priorities were primarily domestic, and immigration, I think, the biggest priority of all.
And so this is, of course, where the rubber hits the road, and the reality of his very, very bold immigration proposals. It's likely to involve mass deportations. Obviously, there's the impact on communities and families and lives, but there is also likely to be an impact on the economy. We know, for example, that a large proportion of the labouring workforce are undocumented illegals. What happens if that workforce dries up? And he's pledged to build houses, for example.
Well, he's not going to be able to deport 11 million people. It's just not going to happen. He is going to have to deport a large number of people, and he's going to have to be seen to be doing it because he said that's what he was going to do. So, yes, the illegal workforce will be reduced, and yes, it may have an impact on inflation in America, in the same way that if he uses tariffs on foreign countries, the cost of American goods will go up because they're not being made in cheaper parts of the world. And he skated over the tariff details today. He didn't go into any specific threats to specific countries because I think he knows that he wants to hold it back as leverage, as a bargaining chip.
And you know this song very well, having spent many years in DC yourself. That was the voice of Christopher Macchio, an opera singer dubbed America's tenor, singing the national anthem. Of course, previously we had Lady Gaga singing the national anthem. So the rest of proceedings, we expect the president at some point to actually sign some executive orders. There will be a luncheon, and he will eventually progress to further events at the Capital One Arena, and then, of course, the White House. But Jonathan, back to the discussion we were just having about the policy announcements that he's already put forward. Tariffs. He mentioned something, I mean, vaguely, I don't want to say Orwellian, but the name had a ring to it. He's going to set something up called the External Revenue Service.
Yes, he made it very clear there will be tariffs on trade with foreign countries to enrich our citizens, as he put it. And as you say, an external revenue service, which is a line that went down well because everybody dreads the IRS, the Inland Revenue Service.
So if we can get the foreigners to pay for it.
If we can get the foreigners to pay for it. And the figures that his administration have put out have varied massively between 10, 15% tariffs on Mexico and Canada, 60% on China. One just doesn't know how seriously to take any of it. I'm inclined to think, because it could have a negative effect on the US economy, that it is more of a bargaining chip at this stage than anything else. But if countries don't step into line and dance to Donald Trump's tune, things could change. I mean, President Trump is talking
Biden
about
just leaving the ceremony there. This formally concludes his period as Commander-in-Chief.
Some of those stone-faced Democrats during that inauguration speech.
At what point do you think they change the nuclear codes?
Well, if I knew the answer to that, I would be a danger to American national security. But it's pretty instant that, I mean, it's now, isn't it? I mean, it is the main priority of any US president is to be the commander-in-chief, to keep the country safe, and therefore controlling the nuclear codes which are given to the nuclear submarine fleet at sea is priority number one.
We've talked a lot about his domestic agenda. Notable that the two foreign senior dignitaries that we've seen there, Javier Milei and Giorgia Meloni, who do you think Trump is going to want to visit or be visited by first?
It's really interesting. Which country did Donald Trump visit first time round when he was president? Saudi Arabia. I mean, that hasn't happened before. And it spoke to his interest in weapons deals, the flow of oil, his fascination for another dynastic ruling family, which is kind of how he sees his own. Where will he go? I mean, traditionally, Mexico maybe, but, you know, he's just said he's going to deport millions of Mexicans, essentially, and other people from Central and South America. Canada, well, he's made warlike noises about them becoming a state of the United States of America.
The 51st.
The UK, well, there is talk of giving Donald Trump a second state visit, which would be, you know, historic. That hasn't happened before.
But it can't be high on his agenda. The relationship with the UK is essentially relatively stable. There's not a lot in it for now, is there?
No. And it took several months for Trump to, I think it was May before he embarked on his first foreign trip. So he's got time to work that out. And of course, we've got that thorny question of Peter Mandelson Lord Mandelson becoming the British ambassador, which was hailed by a lot of people at the time as a sort of visionary step. But now people are saying, look, this is a guy who is very pro-EU, he's got good ties with China. Is he? He's not a billionaire. You know, Trump likes very rich people. He respects money. Was this a wise choice? We know that the bust of Winston Churchill is being restored to the Oval Office, which is a sort of symbol of Anglo-American friendship, as you know.
And he is, in many essences, an Anglophile or a UK file, perhaps, is a better way to put it, given his Scottish
a royal
roots.
family fan and a fan of Scottish golf courses, and of course his mother being from Scotland, and his favourite Brits, Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage, Liz Truss, who've all been in America.
Who is in DC at the moment, we understand.
Yes, I think Boris Johnson was at the church service this morning in Lafayette Square, just outside the White House.
Let's dip in and see if we can pick up any chatter, or if it is more choir and military bands.
You wonder how Elon Musk there can run this multi-million-dollar company when he's so busy tweeting on X about America's priorities and what's gone wrong in the UK and all the things he's been saying in the last few weeks.
I mean, many people have queried how long the relationship between Musk and Trump can continue, given that both of their desire and need to be the loudest voice in the room.
Yeah, but there's only one president of the United States, and President Trump is ruthless. He will get rid of people if they begin to annoy him or if they begin to steal his thunder. They'll be gone. I mean, it was a revolving door at the last Trump White House, where even John Bolton, his national security advisor, was considered too extreme for Donald Trump.
And they've fallen out hugely.
Massively, and Bolton wrote a sort of tell-all memoir. In fact, so many books came out about the Trump presidency, about how
Johnson,
chaotic it was.
The House Republican leader. And what else stuck out for you in his inaugural address? I mean, another geopolitical, symbolic perhaps, but he will rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Flagged beforehand, we kind of thought that he might say something like that, but what does that say to his supporters?
Well, it's an easy win, isn't it? You know, it's a sort of populist nationalist thing to do, and Mount McKinley being renamed Mount McKinley after Barack Obama had the name changed. I think it's part of this sort of war on woke. It's part of this, you know, we won't be taken advantage of. We will be far more exceptional than ever before, he said. America's decline is over. It's Liberation Day was the phrase he used.
Yes, the 20th of January 2025 is Liberation Day.
Yeah, and what he calls a revolution of common sense. And I guess, as far as he's concerned, well, it's common sense. It's the Gulf of America, isn't it? Well, it's not the Gulf of Mexico. So expect a lot on that. I mean, I thought there was very little. He's talked briefly about reducing inflation and prices, which of course is really, really important to the American people. And quite a lot of what he's proposing in terms of tariffs may have the opposite effect. And that's, how that plays out is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, so we've got these kind of higher fiber ideas in his address, and then you've got the symbolic stuff around only two genders, male and female, and they both speak to this coalition that came together to support him. Some of it's going to be easier to introduce than others. We don't obviously know what actually will the detail, as Hakeem Jeffries, the rising star in the Democrat Party, their congressional leader for the Democrats in the House. But we await the inaugural, we await the first executive orders to be signed. We await looking at the detail to know more about how he actually intends to deliver the things that he's promised to do.
Yeah, I mean, the White House has put out its first Trump press release. And I think withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement is clear. And what we were talking about earlier about the border, about declaring a national emergency, about sending the National Guard, about having drugs cartels declared as terrorists, and also ending, not just reducing the number of refugees, but actually suspending the whole refugee process.
Well, it's the catch and release process that they're so offended by, where people that wish to claim asylum are told that they can remain in the US pending the claim, and what he wants to do is actually send them back to the source
So now we're
country.
going back to Trump version 1, which is you can only have your claim processed when you're still in Mexico. You can't have it done in the United States.
Yeah.
But separate from that, the whole issue of refugees from all over the world.
Yeah.
So Joe Biden set a limit of 125,000 refugees a year. Donald Trump had preceded it with 15,000, so much, much less than Biden. And now it seems from the White House press release that we've got, they're now saying zero. They're now suspending refugee arrivals in the United States.
Which presumably is contrary to the Geneva Convention. One has obligations under international law.
Well, the Geneva Convention has been ridden roughshod over for quite some time now. What we didn't see, which may happen, is a reintroduction of the so-called Muslim ban, where basically people from 7 countries in the Middle East and North Africa, Muslim majority countries, in 2017, during the first Trump term, were banned. And there is a strong chance that that comes back.
Yeah, and it is quite remarkable when one looks at the kind of changing fortunes of his relationship with Muslim Americans and what we saw at the beginning. And we're just seeing pictures now of President Biden and Jill Biden getting onto Marine One, leaving the Capitol and leaving his single term. His legacy, of course, will be poured over and perhaps for many Democrats tragically undermined by his refusal to duck out of the race when it became so patently clear that he was struggling to debate, struggling to speak coherently, struggling to communicate what he wanted to do in a second term. And it made it incredibly easy for Trump, obviously, to lean into that, to the extent that when it came to the Republican process, he didn't even have to debate. He was the presumptive nominee, and he rode that incredibly successfully. But back to the point with President Trump's relationship with Muslim Americans, we go back to the start and the Muslim ban, the war in Gaza, and
Well, President Biden's relationship
Indeed.
with Muslim America is not great because of the destruction and carnage in Gaza.
And so many Muslim Americans ended up holding their nose almost and voting for Trump instead because of Biden's refusal to be more forthright.
Yeah, I think watching what Trump does with the Middle East is obviously going to be a key issue. I think there will be an opportunity for Trump to think to himself, could we do a deal with Iran here? Could we disarm them? Are they sufficiently weakened by Israeli attacks, the collapse of Hezbollah? Or does he do what Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, is presumed to want, which is to launch an attack on Iran to destroy its nuclear program? I think that will be a huge issue, and I think that Trump's issue will be saying no. I want to try and do a deal with these people. Whether that argument wins the day in the White House, I don't know. But I mean, it was clear from what he said, and it was an important point, which he covered quite quickly. He said, I'm a peacemaker.
And we know he's certainly not a fan of American involvement in foreign conflicts.
No, he wanted the Gaza war wrapped up. It has been wrapped up. There was nobody better to send a message to Benjamin Netanyahu than Donald Trump's emissary to the Middle East, because Netanyahu has described Trump as the best American president Israel's ever had.
And the two presidents there, both of whom were, of course, involved in the end of the war in Gaza, who had more influence on that process? I'm sure that discussion will be continued for many, many, many more a moon. Jonathan, we are coming to an end of our live stream of the inauguration of President Donald J. Trump. Trump 2.0, just as Biden is about to get on to Marine One. What's your key takeaway from what you have heard from President Trump today?
Well, just looking at those pictures and seeing a 78-year-old Trump and an 82-year-old Biden. I mean, these are, let's be frank, these are old men. But there is a revolutionary zeal about Donald Trump, a determination, a vindication as he sees it, that, you know, he's still inferring that he won the last election in 2016, 2020, and a real fire in his belly, I think, to make America, as he has often said, great again. And I think he has shown himself with that inauguration speech to have a real ambition to be the most consequential American president in the first 24 hours that we've seen in a very long time, for better or for worse.
The disruptor-in-chief is back. Well, as President Trump says goodbye to President Biden, like Joe Biden, we are out of time and out of office. Jonathan and myself are stepping down for now, as the Channel 4 News main evening news team itches to get back into the studio where we are to prepare for tonight's news. It has been great to be with you as events unfolded and Donald Trump became, once again, the most powerful person on the planet. From all of the team and from Jonathan and I in the studio and Kieran in Washington, D.C., good night.